Chapter 1: How Candide was brought up in a magnificent castle and how he was expelled thence. In Chapter 1 we are introduced to the main character Candide, a kind, gentle, innocent youth who lives in the castle of Baron Thunder Tentronckh. Candide is the illegitimate son of the Baron's sister. His mother refused to marry his father because his father's family tree can only be traced back to 71 quarterings. Candide takes lessons with the preceptor Pangloss, who is considered both an oracle and a professor. Pangloss teaches metaphysico-theologo-cosmology and is a firm believer that the current state of the world is the best possible state and that everything in this world is created for a specific end. For example, observe that the nose has been formed to bear spectacles, thus we have spectacles. Legs are visibly designed for stockings, and we have stockings. Candide listens to Pangloss with great interest and wonder, believing everything that Pangloss teaches him. Candide also tells us that he finds the Baron's daughter Cunegonde to be extremely beautiful, but he doesn't have the courage to tell her. One day, while out for a walk, Cunegonde sees Pangloss giving a science lesson out in the park. She watches breathlessly from a distance, fully intrigued by Pangloss's experiments and explanations. Her greatest desire is to be able to learn from Pangloss so that she can be educated to please Candide. When she returns to the castle, she bumps into Candide and they exchange awkward hellos. The next day after dinner, Candide and Cunegonde slip away from the table and go hide behind a screen together where they steal a quick kiss. Baron Thunder Tentronckh catches them and chases Candide out of the castle. Candide is never to return if he wants to keep living. Chapter 2: What became of Candide among the Bulgarians? After being chased from the castle, Candide wanders for a long time. He eventually comes upon a town called Walderburg off Trarbdikdorf. Candide is starving, and so he stops at an inn where two men greet him. They invite Candide to dinner, but Candide doesn't have any money to pay his share. The men say Candide appears to be the proper height of 5 foot 5 inches tall and tell him he doesn't have to pay because only men were made to help each other. Candide agrees with this because Pangloss has also taught them this. The men beg Candide to take some of their money and ask Candide to drink to the king of the Bulgarians. Candide has never met or heard of the king of the Bulgarians, but he drinks to his health anyway. After he drinks to the two men, tell him he is now the defender and hero of the Bulgarians, and he is taken to a military training camp where he is forced to join the Bulgarian army. Candide is abused every day during training, but he is constantly told he is a hero. One day he decides to go out for a walk because he believes it's his human privilege to go out and use your legs. A little while into his walk, Candide is stopped by 3 men from his regiment who capture him and accuse him of deserting. Candide is given the option of running the gauntlet and being whipped or being shot. He says he has free will and that he will not do either, but eventually he is forced to run the gauntlet if he doesn't want to be killed. Candide is brutally wounded after running the gauntlet twice and is very near death. His skin has been flayed from his body and is basically hanging off of him. He begs to be shot and put out of his misery, but just then the Bulgarian king passes and asks Candide about his crime. After learning that Candide is a student of metaphysics, the king pardons him. The skilled surgeon is able to heal Candide over the next 3 weeks. He is healed just in time to go off to war with the Bulgarian army against the Avars.
Trumpets, drums, musket shots, and cannons firing all around. Candide took to himself and attempted to hide from the scene of battle. He was a philosopher, not a soldier, and he did not know how to fight like the Bulgarians. The two kings began to start a Te Deum chant, or a chant of religious praise upon their camps. This was Candide's chance. He took to escaping by sneaking out during the chants. Leaving the camp caused a sense of disgust to wash over him as he climbed over the mounds of dead and dying men all around him. Once out of the camp, he made his way to a neighboring Avar village that the Bulgarians had burned down. As he made his way through the town, he could see the pain in the survivors' eyes as the wives hugged their bloody children. This village was worse off than the army camp, with limbs and brains strewn everywhere. Candide fled to the next village, which was Bulgarian. This was also burned down by the Iberians. There wasn't much difference between this village and the last, so he made his way onward. As Candide arrived in Holland, he ran out of his provisions. He knew, though, that Holland was a land of wealth and Christian people, so he thought he would be greeted with kindness. Only James the Anabaptist offered his help, though. He gave him bread, beer, a place for the night, and some coins. And tearing up, Candide offered his tremendous gratitude for his help. The next day, Candide took a walk and saw a beggar look very diseased, with scabs all over. Candide was moved with the compassion he had received from the Anabaptist, and offered the money he had been given to the beggar. The beggar was astounded that he wasn't recognized by Candide, but he went out to say that he was Pangloss. Candide had many questions to ask and found that Cunegonde was killed by the Bulgarians along with the rest of her family, and the castle broken down to rubble. Candide, heartbroken, fainted in shock of hearing that news. When he awoke, he continued to talk to Pangloss, and found that his attire had been a result of being poisoned by Paquette, whom had waited upon the Baroness, and that he was dying. Candide took him back to James's home to be taken care of, and James offered his help to rest him back to full health. In his recovery, he lost an eye and an ear, and to pay back the Anabaptist for his help, Pangloss became his bookkeeper for 2 months. James had to go do some business in Lisbon after the 2 months, and decided to take the philosophers with him. As they sailed there, they talked of the evil of mankind and how corrupt it was. And while they talked, a storm began to blow in with Lisbon in sight.
Chapter 5. While on a ship being violently rocked by the waves, a sailor is thrown overboard. Honest James runs over to pull him up, but just as he gets the sailor on board, he himself falls and drowns. The ship eventually goes down, and the only survivors are the sailor, Pangloss, and Candide. Once they've all made it to shore, the earth begins to quake, and mighty whirlwinds of fire engulf the city, leaving 30,000 citizens dead. Having survived all of this, Pangloss and Candide lay among the dead trying to regain their strength, while the sailor rummaged through the dead in search of money. What money he found, he spent on alcohol and an escort whom he met among the dead. Pangloss attempted to tell him that what he was doing was wrong, but the man explains to Pangloss that he doesn't believe in the universal reason that he spoke of. Candide lay wounded from the falling rubble and begins to beg for wine and oil because he believes that he's dying. Pangloss ignores him and instead ponders the earthquake and the fact that one just like it had recently happened in another city. The next day, Candide and Pangloss search the dead for anything they can use to get their strength back. They sit and eat with other survivors, and Pangloss assures them that it could not be any other way. It is impossible that things should be other than they are, for everything is right. One of the survivors begins to argue with Pangloss, saying that if he believes this is the best possible world, then he must not believe in the original sin, nor the falling and punishment of the human race. Pangloss attempts to explain, but the man, losing interest, interrupts him and asks for more wine. Chapter 6. 3/4 of Lisbon has been completely destroyed, so the remaining citizens decide to slowly burn some of their people as a sort of sacrifice to keep the earth from quaking again. Those among the sacrificed were a man convicted of marrying his godmother, 2 Portuguese men who refused to eat bacon, proving that they were Jewish, Pangloss for speaking his mind, and Candide for acting as though he approved of what Pangloss had said. Candide was whipped publicly, Pangloss hanged, and the other 3 burned alive. Candide begins to wonder what all the other worlds must be like if this is supposed to be the best of them. While pondering the loss of his friends, an old woman approaches and says to him, "My son, take courage and follow me."
Chapter 7. Candide follows the old woman to a decayed house where she gives him food, drink, ointment for his wounds, new clothing, and a bed to sleep in. She takes care of him for a few days until one day she tells Candide to follow her. She takes him to a beautiful isolated house surrounded by gardens. Inside, she leads him to an opulent apartment, complete with a brocade couch, where he is instructed to take the veil off a woman who turns out to be no other than Miss Cunegonde. She shares with him that she had been raped, but not murdered as the rest of her family were. She commences to tell the whole story, after insisting that Candide tell her everything that happened since their kiss. Chapter 8. In this chapter, Cunegonde tells her story. She was at her father's palace when the Bulgarian army attacked and killed her mother, father, and brother. She, having fainted during the violence, is woken by a Bulgarian soldier forcing himself on her. She struggles and he stabs her in the thigh with his knife. Then, his commanding officer appears and kills the Bulgarian, not for raping her but for failing to salute properly. He then fixes her wound and takes her as a prisoner of war. After 3 months of being his washwoman, he grows tired of her and sells her to a Jewish trader named Don Issachar, who is passionately fond of women. He brought her to the country house. Then one day, the Grand Inquisitor begins to ogle her at Mass and insists she should belong to him instead of someone so below her status. Upon threat of being burnt at the stake, Don Issachar makes an agreement with the Grand Inquisitor that they will split her with the Inquisitor, each getting her every other day. Cunningham continues to warn off the advances of both men and says she believes that is the very reason they liked her in the first place. The Inquisitor takes her to a public execution after Mass where they serve refreshments. There, she is horrified by the sight of Pangloss being hanged and Candide whipped, and reflects on how Pangloss's philosophy can't be true because of all the horrors she's had to endure. Finally, she ordered her servant, the old woman, to bring him to her. Her story concluded her and Candide have dinner, followed by an amorous dalliance on the brocade couch, during which Don Issachar walks in.
Chapter 9. Seeing what he believes to be another competitor for Cunegonde's love, Don Issachar attacks Candide, forcing the pupil of optimism to kill him with a sword. After Issachar's death, Candide wishes that Pangloss were there to give him advice, but settles for the opinion of the old woman instead. Before she can give her counsel, however, the Grand Inquisitor enters for his nightly visit, forcing Candide to kill him as well. Quickly, the old woman details the plan of her escape, that they will take what gold and diamonds they can lay their hands on, and then they should flee the estate on the backs of 3 horses. When the Holy Brotherhood, an organization with both church and state powers, enter the household to bury the Holy Inquisitor and fling Issachar into a dunghill, the 3 fugitives are gone. Chapter 10. Having left an inn where they had stayed the day before, the trio soon realizes that a friar who was also at the inn must have stolen their gold and diamonds. To overcome the loss, the old woman suggests, and the others agree, that they should sell one of the horses. Eventually they reach Cadiz, a city on the Atlantic coast. When Candide demonstrates the signs of the Bulgare army, he is made a captain of sorts, as he, Cunegonde, and the old woman begin their journey to South America. Candide, obviously still influenced by the optimistic philosophy of his youth, comes to rest on the idea that the new world will be the best of all worlds. Yet soon both Candide and Cunegonde realize that the trials and tribulations of their own lives are not unique or unusual at all, when the old woman tells them that their horrors pale in comparison to hers. She then launches into a lengthy story of her life's misfortune, making continued allusions to a missing portion of her rear end.